I was 5 minutes into my first peaceful morning on the new ranch, coffee steaming, sunrise painting the sky gold, when a white SUV screeched to a stop outside my gate like it was fleeing a crime scene. I didn't know it yet, but this was the moment my life would get tangled with her, the HOA Karen who would turn this quiet piece of land into a battlefield. The door flew open. Out came a woman dressed like she was headed to a board meeting, not a dusty rural property. Big sunglasses, clipboard, purse the size of a carry-on suitcase, and a stride that told me she was accustomed to people getting out of her way. She didn't even introduce herself. She marched right up to my gate, jabbed her pen toward the private property sign I'd installed the day before, and barked, "You can't do that." Now, I'm a patient man, but when someone opens with a command instead of a hello, patience becomes optional. I can't do what exactly? I asked, sipping my coffee like we had all the time in the world. This gate? She snapped. This fence? This land? None of this complies with the HOA covenant. You need to take it down immediately. I blinked, slowly, because my ranch, my 1,400-acre, clearly outside city limits ranch, wasn't part of any HOA. I told her that. She laughed like I'd said something adorable. "Oh, honey, everything in this subdivision is governed by the Sunrise Estates HOA. Lady, the nearest subdivision was 10 miles away. I thought it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. It was the opening salvo. And within 24 hours, this woman would file complaints, march onto my property, confront my livestock, and, most impressively, call the cops on me for illegally occupying her community. She had no idea who she was messing with, because by the end of this war, I would own her lot, her driveway, and, incidentally, her only access road. If you've ever dealt with an HOA, you probably already know the species of creature Karen was. She wasn't a villain. No, villains have motives. She was more like a force of nature, a hurricane of rules, regulations, and completely fictional authority, the kind that gains power from clipboards and thrives on telling strangers what to do. But I didn't know any of that yet. When she delivered her declaration of HOA dominance, I simply leaned on my fence and asked, "What subdivision are you talking about? I think you're lost." "Don't patronize me," she snapped. "Sunrise Estates expanded its jurisdiction last month. Your so-called ranch sits on land that is now part of our community plan." I stared at her. She stared at me. Somewhere behind us, my horse snorted like she couldn't believe it either. "Look," I said calmly, "this is private land. I bought it from the Henderson family. It's been deeded ranching property for 8 decades. There's no way." "Oh, I don't expect you to understand the paperwork," she cut in. "But the HOA does, and you're going to need to start complying immediately." I didn't reply for a moment. I just watched her, trying to figure out if she was serious or doing some kind of performance art. She was dead serious. She shoved a staple packet at me through the bars of my new gate. It had the words Sunrise Estates Welcome Packet across the front, with a little smiling sun logo that felt both cheerful and deeply threatening. Inside were rules, pages and pages of rules. Rules for house paint colors, rules for mailbox height, rules for acceptable yard decor, rules for trash can visibility, rules for fence materials, rules for lawn length, lawn on a ranch. My property was 1,400 acres of scrubland, cedar trees, rolling hills, and cattle. Not exactly white picket fence territory. I handed the packet back. "None of this applies to me. I'm not part of Sunrise Estates." She recoiled a hand like I tried to hand her a diseased ferret. Refusing to accept HOA documentation is a violation. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I opened the gate, stepped out, and stood eye level with her. "You need to leave my property." That was when she delivered her first threat, though certainly not her last. "If you refuse to comply," she said, "I will escalate this. And trust me, the HOA always wins." She whirled around, marched back to her SUV, and peeled out like she was escaping a crime scene. I didn't think much of it. I should have, because an hour later, 2 sheriff's deputies rolled up my driveway with lights flashing in a report that I was harassing community members. They looked embarrassed even saying it. So, one deputy began, "We got a complaint from, Mrs. Kensington. Says you threatened her for doing HOA inspections." I rubbed my face. "Deputy, I don't live in an HOA." They exchanged a look. "Yeah, we know, but we got to check the call anyway." They left after confirming I hadn't kidnapped or terrorized anyone. Even they seemed annoyed they'd been dragged into this. But Karen wasn't done. That afternoon, she came back with a camera, walking the fence line like a wildlife documentary host, narrating violations to an imaginary audience. The fence is clearly outside permitted dimensions. There is unauthorized livestock on the premises. Owner has failed to submit architectural plans for the barn. She tried to record my horse. My horse recorded her right back by sneezing directly onto a Dolce & Gabbana sunglasses. She shrieked and stormed off. It would have been funny if she weren't plotting something far bigger. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. The HOA was fining me $2,734 for noncompliance. That was the moment I decided. I wasn't just going to make her stop. I was going to make her regret ever setting foot on my land. I didn't know it yet, but I had the perfect weapon. The one thing Karen valued more than rules, control, and the illusion of authority. Her property. And pretty soon, I would own it. The certified letter sat on my kitchen table like a venomous snake. I didn't want to touch it again. Just seeing the Sunrise Estates logo made my eye twitch, but curiosity and irritation are a dangerous combination. I opened it one more time, reading each sentence slowly, partly to calm my temper and partly because I couldn't believe how bold this HOA was. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and potential legal action. Legal action. Against me. On my land. It was almost impressive how wrong they were. But instead of driving down to Karen's house to deliver a lesson in geography and basic property law, I decided to start with something smarter, calling my lawyer. Tom had been my attorney for years. He was calm, mildly sarcastic, and allergic to paperwork. He picked up on the second ring. "You sound stressed," he said without greeting. "I just got fined by an HOA." He paused. "You don't live in an HOA. You're already ahead of them." I explained everything. Karen, the clipboard, her sudden territorial expansion fantasy, and the letter. Tom started laughing halfway through and had to mute himself to recover. "This is ridiculous," he said finally. "They can't enforce anything on you. You're outside their jurisdiction by, 8 miles? 10. Even better. Send me the letter. I'll take care of it." I scanned it and hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Tom." "Oh, they are bold. This is going to get fun." Fun. His definition of fun usually meant someone else was about to have a very bad week. But before he handled it, I decided to get proactive. I believe in two things, peace and preparedness. If Karen wanted to pick a fight she couldn't win, that was her problem. But I wasn't going to sit around waiting for round 2. So I took a scenic drive. Sunrise Estates was something. Rows of identical houses, lawns trimmed within an inch of their life, mailboxes aligned like little soldiers, and people walking dogs like they were auditioning for a brochure. Every home had the exact same beige and taupe color scheme. The only wild thing in the whole subdivision was a squirrel that dared to sit on a roof. I found Karen's house easily. It had the biggest flag, the strictest landscaping, and a sign that read, "HOA President, we keep the community beautiful." So this was a power thing. I kept driving past, but something caught my eye. A small, narrow, gravel access road behind the subdivision. It wound around the backside, connecting the houses to the only county road leading out of the neighborhood. And next to it was a tiny plot of land. 1 acre, maybe 2. Fenced off, overgrown, looked abandoned. No house, no utilities, nothing. But it was interesting, because that little postage stamp of nothingness, it sat directly between Sunrise Estates and the public road, and a sign on the fence said, "Private land, for sale by owner." I felt a slow grin spread across my face. See, some HOAs own their access roads. Some lease them, and some, poorly planned ones, run them through private property under outdated easements they assume will automatically renew forever. But they don't. And judging by the handmade sign, this little lot wasn't owned by the HOA at all. I jotted down the phone number and headed home. When I told Tom about it, he whistled. If that lot is indeed the only access point, and if the easement expired, then Sunrise Estates is in trouble. How much trouble? The kind where their property values get kneecapped. Now, I'm not petty. Okay, fine, I'm petty when provoked. But I wasn't planning on buying the land just to spite Karen. I was planning on buying it because it was a smart investment. The spite? That was a bonus. I called the number. A man named Seth answered, sounding like he'd just rolled out of bed, or maybe never left it. We chatted, and he told me the land belonged to his late uncle. He'd moved out of state and wanted nothing to do with Texas property taxes. How much are you asking? I asked. Make an offer. I mainly want it off my hands. That was the magic phrase. Within 2 hours, Tom had drafted the documents. Within 2 days, the deal was done. And within a week, I officially owned the one piece of land Karen's precious HOA completely depended on. They didn't know yet. Oh, but they would. The day after the sale closed, I was back on my ranch feeding the cattle when I heard tires on gravel. I turned to see Karen's white SUV barreling toward my gate again. This time she looked like she'd practiced her speech in the mirror. She parked, hopped out, and marched up to the fence. You, she barked. Good morning to you, too. You have ignored repeated HOA communication. You have ignored our fines. You have refused to comply. Therefore, I am giving you one final opportunity to. I held up a hand. I don't live in your HOA. I never have, and I never will. She ignored that completely, as if my words were made of helium and floated away before reaching her ears. And if you continue refusing community standards, we will pursue legal action. I already met with our board, and they unanimously approved enforcement escalation. She said this like she was delivering a death sentence. I smiled politely. You do that. She blinked, clearly expecting panic, confusion, or groveling. You aren't taking this seriously. Oh, I am, I assured her, very seriously. In fact, I've taken steps of my own. Suspicion creased her forehead. What steps? Legal steps. She stiffened. What kind of legal steps? Ones you'll find out about soon. She sputtered as I walked back toward the barn, refusing to give her the dramatic confrontation she wanted so badly. She yelled after me, You can't disregard the HOA. You're part of our community, whether you like it or not. I kept walking. She kept yelling. It echoed across the pasture until her voice cracked. Later that night, as I watched the sunset from my porch, my phone buzzed. Tom again. They sent a cease and desist, he wrote. Also, you officially own the access lot. Get ready. They're about to panic. I leaned back in my chair, smiling into the fading light. Karen thought she had power because she had rules. But I had something much better. I had leverage. And soon, 3 days. That's how long it took for Sunrise Estates to realize something was wrong. Not mildly wrong. Not inconvenient wrong. No, existentially, catastrophically, property-value threateningly wrong. On the morning of day 1, the HOA board got a copy of my lawyer's letter informing them that their expanded jurisdiction initiative was illegal, unenforceable, and surprisingly stupid. They ignored it, naturally. That's what HOAs do best. On day 2, they tried imposing urgent compliance penalties on me again. Tom sent back a reply that consisted of exactly 3 sentences. He is not under your jurisdiction. You have no legal authority over him. Cease further contact. He ceased the county sheriff for good measure. On day 3, the real fun started. That was a day the trash trucks didn't show up to collect the HOA's garbage. Why? Because the garbage trucks had to use a narrow gravel access road. My gravel access road. The one I now owned. The one whose old, long-expired easement was no longer valid. And until someone sorted out the legal mess, the waste company wasn't touching that road. By noon, trash bins up and down Sunrise Estates were overflowing with suburban despair. People were standing outside in their polo shirts and yoga pants, looking up the road like abandoned puppies waiting for someone to bring their lives back to routine. By 2 p.m., Karen was on the phone with anyone who would listen. By 3 p.m., the HOA board held an emergency meeting in someone's immaculate beige-den living room, where everyone was too polite to say the word sitting in their heads. We're screwed. And I? Well, I was sitting on my porch, drinking iced tea, watching the whole thing unfold through binoculars like it was a nature documentary titled The Downfall of an HOA, Rise of the Rancher. Tom called me that afternoon. They finally read the easement, he said, and the last one expired in 1992. The HOA has no legal right to use your road unless you grant permission. I smiled slowly. Let me guess. They are not handling the news well. That's one way to put it. Did you know they tried calling the county to demand enforcement? And the county said that it's private land, so they can't force access. They recommended the HOA negotiate with you directly. I laughed, loudly. Karen having to negotiate with me was a kind of karmic payback that made the universe feel balanced. But Karen wasn't known for doing things the easy way, or the reasonable way, or the legal way. So first, she tried drama. That evening, just before sunset, her SUV came tearing down the road again, thus flying like she was being pursued by demons, or possibly reality. She slammed the door behind her and marched straight to my gate, stopping so close her sunglasses almost smudged against the bars. "You!" she shrieked, pointing as though identifying me at a police lineup. "Me," I agreed. "Still here. Still on my property." "What have you done?" I took a long, exaggerated sip of tea. "Define done." "You bought that land, that lot behind our subdivision. You blocked entry." I shook my head. "No, the HOA blocked their own entry by letting their easement expire 33 years ago." She ignored the math completely. "You are illegally interfering with the operation of our community." "Nope," I corrected. "I'm legally minding my own business. It's just that now my business happens to include land you depend on." Her jaw clenched so tightly I heard a click. "You need to restore access immediately," she demanded, sounding like a queen ordering knights into battle. "And why would I do that?" I asked. "Because the HOA demands it." "Try again." "Because it's the right thing to do." I lifted a brow. "Lady, you tried to fine me for owning cattle." She waved her arms dramatically. "This affects everyone in our community. People can't get deliveries. The mail carrier got confused. The trash company refuses to come." I sipped my tea again. "That sounds like a problem for, let me think, the HOA president." If facial expressions were weapons, I'd have needed medical attention. "You cannot hold an entire community hostage," she shouted. "That's funny," I said calmly. "I thought you were trying to hold me hostage with your fake rules." She stumped her foot. Actually stumped it. "That lot is essential to our subdivision." "Yes," I nodded. "And now it's mine. I'll take good care of it." She sucked in a breath so sharp I worried the oxygen levels in the county might drop. "You listen to me," she said, leaning forward like she was about to deliver the climax of a courtroom drama. "The HOA has lawyers too. We will fight this." "I hope so," I said. "Tom gets bored without a challenge." She turned bright red. "I am issuing an emergency violation notice," she declared, pulling out her clipboard like it was Excalibur. I held up a finger. "Before you write anything, you might want to check your mail tomorrow." She paused. "Why?" "Oh, no reason. Just a formal acknowledgement that I now own the access lot, and a copy of a new usage policy." Her eyes narrowed. "Usage policy?" "Yes. A schedule of permitted times, approved vehicles, and," I paused for effect, "fees." She actually choked. "Fees?" "Well, if your HOA needs to use private property, it's only fair I charge rent." She pointed her pen at me with trembling outrage. "You're insane." "No, I'm organized." She spun around and stormed off so hard her heels nearly dug holes in the earth. The next morning, I delivered the usage policy. It was beautifully formatted, professional, detailed, and the fee structure? Let's just say Sunrise Estates was about to have the most expensive garbage pickup in county history. I included a polite letter. I am open to negotiation. However, all previous fines you issued against me must be withdrawn. I also expect a written apology and acknowledgement that my ranch is not under HOA jurisdiction. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone reasonable on the board would see the opportunity for peace. They did not. 40 minutes after delivery, my phone pinged with a desperate message from Tom. Brace yourself. They are calling an emergency town hall meeting tonight. Karen's about to go nuclear. I settled back into my porch chair, cracked open a beer, and smiled. Let her go nuclear. I had the fallout shelter. And tomorrow, the entire HOA would realize something even worse. Karen was the one who caused it all. The Sunrise Estates Community Center looked like the kind of place where mild-mannered people went to sip lukewarm coffee and discuss the appropriate height of decorative lawn gnomes. But that night, it was a battlefield. By 6:30 p.m., the parking lot was overflowing. People were marching inside carrying trash bags, actual full garbage bags, like they were storming the gates of the monarch who'd failed her kingdom. Others clutched Amazon boxes that hadn't been delivered for days. One guy even brought his dog, apparently to show the board the emotional support animal that hadn't gotten groomed because a grooming van couldn't access the road. Inside, the room buzzed with irritation. Chairs scraped, voices murmured, complaints surged. Everyone's eyes were glued to a long folding table at the front where the HOA board members sat, including the woman of the hour, Karen. She looked stressed, more stressed than I'd ever seen her. Hair slightly frazzled. Makeup doing its best but failing under the pressure. Clipboard clutched in white-knuckled hands. She sat in the center like a dictator defending her crumbling empire. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. It began at 6:45 because a crowd demanded it. The HOA treasurer, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, tapped the microphone. Good evening. We're here to address the recent access concerns. Access concerns, someone yelled. We can't get out of the neighborhood. We're trapped in beige prison, another resident cried. This is your fault, shouted a woman in yoga pants, pointing at Karen. You said the land was part of the HOA. Karen jerked upright. It should be. We have every right to expand our jurisdiction to ensure standards. Standards won't help my overflowing trash can, someone muttered. Another voice cut through the crowd. Why did we not know the easement expired 30 years ago? All heads turned toward Karen. She cleared her throat. Because it has never been an issue before. The previous owners never interfered with the HOA's use of the road. The rancher who bought the property is unreasonable. Unreasonable. Like I'd personally caused the downfall of civilization. The treasurer raised a hand to calm everyone. It didn't work. People just shouted louder. What's this about fees? He's charging us rent now. I refuse to pay to leave my own neighborhood. Karen slammed her clipboard down. Nobody is paying him anything. I refuse to let Sunrise Estates be extorted. A man in the second row stood up, the kind of man built like he could bench press the subdivision's water tower. Then how do you propose we get to work, Karen? Teleportation. She flinched. We're exploring legal remedies. Legal remedies didn't empty my trash, another shouted. A murmur rolled through the room. I leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, just observing. Nobody noticed me yet. I wanted to see how this played out before stepping into the spotlight. The treasurer looked at Karen wearily. Did you speak to the ranch owner before asserting jurisdiction? Yes, she barked. And I told him he was part of our community, whether he liked it or not. That seems inaccurate, he said delicately. He has livestock, she hissed, as if that proved her case. This time the entire room groaned. A woman with a baby on her hip stood up. Karen, why did you tell us he had to follow HOA rules if he wasn't part of the HOA? Because he should be, she repeated, louder, more desperate. He lives close enough. He benefits from being near us, and there are standards to maintain. The treasurer rubbed his temples. Close enough is not a legal term. Is threatening us, she shrieked. Someone replied, No, you threatened him first. At that moment, chaos erupted. People stood, gesturing wildly. Others waved letters and policy sheets Tom had mailed. The dog barked. A toddler cried. Someone demanded a refund of HOA dues. Another shouted they were suing. The treasurer slammed his hand on the table, but was about as effective as a wet noodle trying to stop a stampede. And then someone finally noticed me. Hey, isn't that him? Dozens of heads swiveled. Conversation froze mid-complaint. Karen turned slowly, like a malfunctioning robot, and her eyes widened in horror. I smiled politely and lifted a hand. Evening. A wave of muttering swept the crowd. What's he doing here? That's the ranch guy. Maybe he has answers. Please tell me you can fix this. One brave soul approached me. Sir, is it true you own the access lot now? Yes, I said, as of last week. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Then why, WHY, did you block the road? A man asked. I didn't block anything, I said calmly. I simply informed the HOA that they can't use private land for free. People turned to stare at Karen. You knew about this, Karen, someone whispered. I assumed, she stammered. You assumed, a woman said, incredulous. You assumed jurisdiction over property you didn't own. The treasurer cleared his throat. Technically, that is illegal. Karen snapped. We are an HOA. We enforce standards. We have authority. Not off the subdivision, someone yelled. A man in the front row turned to me. Sir, what do you want? What will it take to get our access back? I pulled a folded piece of paper from my jacket. The room leaned in. These are my conditions, I said. Very simple. The HOA retracts all fines issued against me. Karen provides a written apology. The HOA acknowledges publicly that my ranch is not, never was, and never will be under their jurisdiction. We negotiate a fair access agreement. The room whispered intensely. Eyes darted to Karen. She looked like she was about to ignite from sheer rage. This is blackmail, she shrieked. No, the treasurer said firmly. This is property rights. You created this. You escalated it without consulting us. You put this entire community at risk. Someone added, Yeah, Karen, we trusted you. The dog barked in agreement. Karen rose, trembling to her feet. I will not apologize to someone who defies our standards. At that exact moment, a resident approached the front table with something in his hands. A trash bag. He dropped it onto the table so hard papers flew. This, he declared, pointing at the leaking bag, is on you. The dam broke. People surrounded Karen, yelling, demanding answers, demanding accountability, demanding she fix the very disaster she created. Meanwhile, I just stepped back, hands in pockets, watching the unraveling. The treasurer finally raised both hands. Enough. We're voting on this now. Karen glared at him. You can't vote without the president. He gave her a long, tired look. That's what we're voting on. The room erupted with cheers. Karen went pale. The treasurer sighed, looked at me, and said, Sir, please wait outside. We'll negotiate with you shortly. I smiled, because I already knew the outcome. They were about to strip Karen of her crown. And tomorrow, the HOA would learn a lesson they'd never forget. The night of the HOA meeting ended with the kind of chaotic energy usually reserved for reality shows and political coups. I waited outside the community center, leaning against my truck under the soft glow of the streetlights, listening to the rumble of voices inside shift from outrage to shouting to something eerily like chanting. When the doors finally opened, people spilled out in waves, some angry, some relieved, some exhausted, all of them ready for change. The treasurer spotted me and made a beeline in my direction. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie half undone, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. Sir, he said breathlessly, we, need to talk. Behind him, Karen emerged. Was dragged out by momentum might be a more accurate description. Her hair was frazzled, her clipboard was missing, and her expression was a cross between furious and stunned, like a queen who had just been informed her subject preferred democracy. The treasurer cleared his throat. We held a vote. I gathered, I said. He wiped sweat from his brow. Karen has been removed as HOA president. A small group of residents behind him started clapping spontaneously. Someone whistled. Someone else lifted their dog like a Simba moment. Karen, however, looked at me like she was plotting my immediate demise. "This is your doing," she hissed. "No," the treasurer corrected gently. "This was our doing." "We trusted your judgment," another resident added. "You said he was violating rules. You didn't even check the property maps." A woman holding a toddler shook her head. "He's not even close to the HOA boundary line." Another voice chimed in. "I lost 3 days of work because you insisted he had to comply with imaginary rules." The final blow came from a man with silver hair and a calm voice. "You abuse your position, Karen. This is on you." Karen stood frozen, knuckles white, eyes burning with denial. The treasurer turned back to me. "So, on behalf of Sunrise Estates, I want to offer our apologies." I said nothing. I wanted him to keep talking. "We retract all fines issued against you. We acknowledge in writing that your ranch is entirely outside the HOA, and we would like to negotiate an access agreement with you soon. Fair terms, reasonable fees, nothing abusive." That was exactly what I wanted to hear. "Sounds good," I said, "but there's still one more condition." Karen stiffened. "The apology," I said. Then I looked directly at her. "From the person responsible." The crowd shifted like they all collectively held their breath. Karen stared at me with pure venom. "I will not apologize to someone who—" "Yes, you will." Half the neighborhood roared in unison. She jerked back as if struck. The treasurer stepped beside her, voice firm. "Karen, you caused this. Nobody else. You owe him an apology." Karen swallowed, fury warring with humiliation. She looked around and realized, for the first time, maybe ever, that no one was backing her. No one feared her authority anymore. No one respected her clipboard, her sunglasses, or her self-appointed power. She was alone. Her voice cracked as she forced the words out. "I apologize." The silence afterward was so thick you could have spread it on toast. She continued through clenched teeth. "We were wrong to assume we had jurisdiction over your land." "And," someone prompted. "And," she gulped, "I am sorry for the trouble I caused." It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't even remotely heartfelt. But it was an apology. And it was on record. "That'll do," I said. People began to disperse after that, buzzing with relief. The treasurer shook my hand and promised we'd meet later to finalize the agreement. Residents waved, thanked me, even offered me baked goods. Apparently, HOA stress makes suburbanites hyper-generous with cookies. But Karen didn't leave. She stood there, staring at me with a look of deep, simmering hatred. I could practically hear her thoughts. This isn't over. And she was right. Because while the HOA's battle with me was winding down, Karen's fight was just getting warmed up. The next morning, sunrise hit the dew-covered pasture in bright streaks of gold. It should have been a peaceful morning. It started that way, too. I was checking on the cattle when I spotted something moving along the fence line near the back of my property. A figure, moving fast, sneaking. Karen. She was dressed in gym clothes this time, hood pulled low, backpack slung over her shoulder. She was tiptoeing like someone who had watched too many heist movies. I sighed, grabbed my hat, and hopped into the truck. By the time I reached the back gate, she was fiddling with something, metal sticks, trying to wedge them into the gate hinges. I rolled down the window. If you're trying to pick the lock, it opens from the other side. She jumped like she'd been struck by lightning. "I wasn't. You," she sputtered. "Morning," I said. She backed away from the gate, clutching the backpack like it held state secrets. "I was just inspecting." "It's not your property," I reminded her. "You have nothing to inspect." Her jaw trembled with frustration. "You can't just take our access road away." "You took it away yourselves when you ignored the easement," I said. "Now the HOA is working with me to fix it." Calmly. She shook her head violently. No, you ruined everything. I spent years building this community. I kept it perfect. I kept it beautiful. Then you show up with your cattle and your fences and your ridiculous land purchase. I said flatly, I bought an empty acre, not an army tank. You bought it to spite M.E. I paused. Well, she wasn't entirely wrong. Whether it spited you or not, I said, it's mine, and the HOA is handling this now. I am the HOA, she screamed. No, I said gently, you are the HOA. Big difference. Something in her face cracked at that. Her expression twisted. If you think I'm letting you control access to my community, you're insane. I raised an eyebrow. What exactly are you going to do about it? She unzipped her backpack. My gut tightened until I saw what she pulled out. Spray paint. Neon orange. She tried shaking the can threateningly, like it was a weapon of mass destruction. I'm marking my road, she declared. It's my road, I corrected. It should be ours, she nearly shrieked. She took aim at the gate like she was about to paint a giant obscene message across it. I reached out calmly and plucked the paint can from her hand. No, I said, we're not doing vandalism today. She stumped her foot, actually stumped it again, like a toddler denied dessert. I will get this land back, she growled. This isn't over. It is for the HOA, I said, but if you want to make this personal, go ahead. I've got more lawyers than cattle. That wasn't true. I had way more cattle. But she didn't need to know that. Karen backed away slowly, eyes narrowed, fury simmering. Then she turned and stormed off, again, shouting something about taking this to the county commissioner. I watched her go. Part of me hoped she'd calm down. Most of me knew she wouldn't. And sure enough, the very next morning, she went nuclear. Not HOA nuclear. Not community nuclear. Counter-level nuclear. And this time, she wouldn't just cause chaos for herself. She was about to drag the entire county government and every neighbor she had into the storm, because Karen had found a new target, me, and she was about to make the biggest mistake of her entire clipboard-wielding career. Karen going to war with me was predictable. Karen going to war with the county government was ambitious and catastrophically stupid. It started early the next morning. The sun wasn't even up yet, but I saw flashing lights roll past my ranch gate, county vehicles, official-looking trucks, and even a news van trailing behind like a hungry buzzard sensing a fresh carcass. I sighed. Only Karen could create a circus before breakfast. I hopped in the truck and followed them down the road toward the access lot, my access lot. By the time I pulled up, there were county engineers, a survey team, 2 sheriff's deputies, 3 HOA board members, a gaggle of Sunrise Estates residents, and smack in the middle of all of it, Karen, wearing a blazer like she was testifying before Congress, clipboard in hand, of course. When she spotted me, she raised her chin triumphantly. You're too late, she said with icy satisfaction. I reported your illegal land grab to the county. They're reviewing the road access issues now. I looked at the sheriff's deputy who'd responded to her earlier complaints. He gave me a look that said, please forgive me. Sir, I don't get paid enough for this. The county engineer stepped forward politely. Morning. We're investigating a report that someone has blocked a public road. My road, Karen said loudly. He blocked my entire community's road. I leaned casually against my truck. The road's not blocked. Karen spun toward me. Yes, IT is. You refuse access. I refuse free access, I said. There's a difference. The engineer turned to Karen. This is a private road. No, it isn't. It's been used by the HOA for decades. Yes, I said, under an easement that expired 33 years ago. One of the surveyors nodded. His right. Deed records show no valid current easement. It reverted fully to the property owner. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a cactus. That's ridiculous, she snapped. The HOA should have been notified if it expired. The engineer shrugged. It expired in 1992. That's before the subdivision was built, I added helpfully. The HOA treasurer stepped in cautiously. Karen, we told you this yesterday. I don't care what you told M.E., she screamed. This man is holding our entire neighborhood hostage, and the county needs to force him to reopen access. The sheriff sighed. He's under no obligation to provide free access. This is private land. Karen stomped toward the engineer dramatically. Well then, the county needs to seize it. Silence. You could have heard a gnat sneeze. The engineer blinked. Seize it. Yes, she said. Eminent domain, or whatever it's called. Take it from him. It belongs to Sunrise Estates. The surveyor pushed his hat back. Eminent domain is only used for public benefit. Your HOA is not a public entity. Karen jabbed her pen at the lot. But it's critical for our community. Your community, the engineer replied, did not secure its legal rights. Karen scoffed. Well then, fix it. He paused, then turned to me. Mr. Rancher, what exactly are your terms? I smiled. The same ones the HOA already agreed to. A fair access agreement. Paid. Respectfully. Karen screeched. WE aren't paying him anything. The treasurer sighed. Karen, stop. She whirled on him. Stop? Stop? You're taking his side? We're taking the side of reality, he said calmly. The HOA voted last night. You're no longer president. I am the HOA, she screamed again, voice cracking. The deputy muttered quietly. You're really not. Karen looked around and realized, once again, nobody supported her. Not the board, not the homeowners, not the county, not even the sheriff, who was clearly counting the minutes until he could escape. Her face contorted, anger, humiliation, panic, all blending into one. Then she made her final mistake. Her last, desperate, nuclear option mistake. She marched over to the gate of my access lot, pulled a set of keys from her pocket, keys that clearly didn't belong to anything here, and tried to jam them into the lock. I'm opening this road myself, she screamed. The keys scraped and scratched uselessly. The deputy warned, you need to stop. She didn't. She threw her shoulder against the gate. It didn't budge. She tried again. Nothing. Then she let out a primal yell, grabbed the lock, and tried to pry it open with the keys, bending them out of shape. The deputy stepped forward. That's vandalism of private property. I'm going to need you to calm down. Karen shrieked. This is not private. I stepped closer, arms folded. You need to stop. Shut UP, she screamed at me, red-faced, unhinged. You ruined everything. You think you can just buy anything you want. You think you're better than our community. You think. Her rant ended abruptly when the deputy gently but firmly took her wrist. That's enough. Please step away from the gate. No, she shouted, yanking her arm back. I will fix this. She tried one more time, lifting the bent keys, swinging them like a weapon, and slamming them against a metal lock. That was it. The deputy grabbed her arm again, more firmly this time. You're under arrest for vandalism of private property. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Karen froze. You can't arrest me, she barked. Yes, the deputy said. I can. Do you know who I am? She yelled. Yes, the deputy said tiredly. I do. As he guided her toward the patrol car, she twisted back to glare at me. This isn't over, she screamed. But it was. For once in her clipboarding career. It really was. The aftermath. The county finalized everything within a week. The HOA and I signed a legally binding access agreement. Reasonable. Paid on time. No drama. The HOA publicly acknowledged my ranch had nothing to do with them. That acknowledgement was framed and now hangs in my bond office. Karen was officially banned from holding any HOA position ever again. Not just in Sunrise Estates. In the entire county. Turns out the county commissioner was not amused by her antics. The access road was reopened. On my terms. Legally. Permanently. Karen eventually moved away. Rumor says she tried joining an HOA 2 towns over, but the moment they Googled her name and saw HOA president charged with vandalism, they politely asked her to leave the interview. She did not take it well. I went back to ranching. Quiet mornings, long rides, peaceful sunsets. Every now and then, I'd pass the access lot, look at the gate, The same gate she tried to pry open, and I'd smile, not because I won, but because she lost to the one thing she never understood. You can bully people with rules. You can intimidate them with forms. You can scare them with fines.